Hello, everybody. Welcome to part two and the final part of this video series, which is preparing for upper division intermediate accounting semester 2. And we're going to talk a little bit about cost accounting. So my disclaimer and copyright notice, the information and opinions in this presentation are those of yours truly and not the authors, employers, or affiliated organizations, including but not limited to Irvine Valley College, the South Orange County Community College District, and California State University Fullerton. Go Titans. Presentation is for educational purposes only and does not constitute any legal or accounting advice whatsoever. Video is meant to be a companion to the 18th edition of Intermediate Accounting by authors Don Cuso, Jerry Weingett, and Terry Warfield. And Wiley has been very kind to allow me to use their questions and create videos about them and make them public. The presentation is copyright 2008 to 2022 by Bennett Tchaikovsky. All rights are reserved. Any distribution is strictly prohibited. Okay, so this all stems from a question as I'm currently studying accounting, reviewing financial managerial accounting. I'm a bit nervous for the intermediate accounting coming up in spring and cost one. Any advice on what I can do to study for the right material to be prepared for those two classes? Well, it's actually 3 classes because there's also intermediate 2. And cost accounting is generally going to be obviously 1 class as well. Now, for the second semester of intermediate accounting, just give me a moment. So for the second semester of intermediate accounting, what you're going to notice is in the first semester, we had a lot more chapters, right? In this one, we have about 10 chapters as opposed to the 14 in the first semester. Now, this is because what we deal with in this is where we get into the real, to the new concepts, right? So, and I taught this class for the first time in the spring of the 22 semester. So I can kind of share with you some of my thoughts in terms of going through and teaching the material. And I have most of those videos that are now publicly out there and available. So you can go through and take a look at them. So for the second semester, you're going to start out with the first exam is going to kind of cover the last part of really what you will have seen from before we get to the new topics from financial accounting. Chapter 12 deals with current liabilities. The main ones you're going to really want to know from that is okay, well, how do we record, say, a warranty? But again, you're going to learn that in this chapter. But also things like, if it's probable, possible, remote, if we can reasonably estimate or we cannot estimate, when do we go through and disclose and record? Chapter 13 deals with non-current liabilities, bonds. So when you get to non-current liabilities, what I would really suggest doing is going back and brushing up on bonds. I would also look at how do you go through and do the effective interest method. Also really important to do. For chapter 14, you're going to be dealing with owner's equity, right? So how does treasury stock work? How does par value work when we issue stock? And then how do we go through and record dividends? So when you're studying for the second semester, this is what you're going to want to have familiarity with. If you go back to my first video in this series, you'll see an extensive discussion of where I have resources in terms of where I can send you information so you can practice this going through on your own. Okay, this is pretty much going to be all new. Chapter 15 is earnings per share. This is nothing short of nasty. It's very challenging. It's doable, but you have to practice. And all I can say is when you're doing fully diluted earnings per share, you can start getting into stuff. If it's anti-dilutive, how do you address those types of things? Chapter 18 is going to be all new. I chose, when I was teaching chapter 18, what I actually did was for that chapter, I actually used the Becker material. And that actually using the Becker guidance, I was able to actually go through and solve most of the problems. Now for chapter 19, which has to do with pensions. Pensions generally, the CPA exam said we're not going to be going through and covering them. I kind of talk about it a little bit, but it's really not going to be a topic that you're really going to see in public accounting, right? So the bigger ones that you really are going to see are chapters 15 and 18, and I could do an exam just on chapter 15. I could literally just do chapter 50 on its own. So that's should tell you all you need to know. So second semester, for chapter 20, this is lease accounting, right? So this is probably going to be new to you in terms of when you're going through and recording a lease. Generally, everything's going to be shown on the financial statements, which is an absolute joke, but we'll say that neither here nor there. Chapter 21 deals with accounting changes and error analysis, which is going to be new to you. Chapter 22, the statement of cash flows, right? So I teach it using the indirect method. There are questions, though, that if your professor says, oh, you need to learn the direct method, well, guess what? The indirect is actually required as a supporting schedule, I believe, if you choose to do direct. I see very few companies doing it. I think one of them that I saw doing direct was Walgreens. But again, it's more of an academic exercise because most of the companies that I've seen use the indirect method of recording, of using the statement of cash flows. Because, by the way, that's by far one of the most important things to learn because it shows you all the crap like stock compensation expense that's thrown in there. Chapter 23, full disclosure and financial reporting. This is kind of like a wrap-up chapter, and this is going to kind of go through and talk really about, well, you know, what are the footnotes to the financial statements, all those kinds of fun things. So that's the second semester of intermediate accounting. So when it comes to cost accounting, I have never taught it on an upper division basis, right? I've taught managerial accounting now for 8 or 9 years. And when I go through and I teach, whenever I teach a class, what I always try to do is I want to find former students, and they're going to tell me, they're going to say, like, Bennett, you're an idiot. You should, only don't say that, but they're going to say, you should have taught us this, or you should have done this. So when I hear that from my former students, I'm going to change the way that I'm teaching the class. Now, here are just some generalizations about cost accounting. So the things that the feedback that I've received was, and the biggest compliment I received was on process costing, because when you're dealing with equivalent units of production, and, you know, if I'm using weighted average or FIFO, understanding how that works is like really important for upper division cost accounting. And because when you get to that upper division cost accounting, it's going from one department, and then it's going to go over to the next. So you may have an instructor that's going to make you do that on a test. It's probably what I would do. You're also going to have things in terms of like job order costing. What if you have over under applied factory overhead? What if it's materially significant? How does that work? Standard costing, meaning that, like, we develop standards and then you have to go through and do the standards for how do you determine materials, labor, and overhead variances. You know, you may have some budgeting, you may have some absorption costing, some cost volume profit. But again, I have now for this, I'm not as far advanced as I am on the financial accounting in terms of having materials. However, I am getting better in terms of having basically video, thanks to Wiley, of having videos that are publicly available that you can go through and check out. So that's really sorry, I can't help you out more in cost accounting, but these are the concepts that I would go through and review. And again, whenever you're taking a class, right, you always want to work backwards, like look at the syllabus, right? Know who your instructor is. Like, go back to the very first video. And if you have questions in the comments below, I would love to hear your feedback. But again, I want to thank the viewer for putting out that question, probably a little bit longer of an answer than he was expecting, but honestly, I'd rather have the longer than the shorter. And I'm also better, I think, on 1.75 or 2 times speed. So in any event, I want to thank you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. If you have questions, feel free to email me at 1812cpa@gmail.com. If you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you on future videos. Have a great one.